Content of this meeting is being sent to YouTube. All right, so technically we're live, even though you don't see it actually live on YouTube. There's a really big lag. All right, there we are. So greetings to everyone. I am here with Michael Kopf, trying to figure out how to drive my bus. All right. Hey, Michael.
How are you?
I'm fabulous, of course. How are you? I could be nothing less.
I'm doing very well. I survived the winter storm so far.
Okay. We got about 4 inches, very wet, very heavy.
Yeah, we got maybe 3/4 to 1 inch, it looked like outside, but I think they said 1 to 3.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there.
Well,
But
it's gonna go down to single digits for us in the temperature in Fahrenheit and next week, and we're not gonna go above freezing for the next 10 days. So bundle up, buttercup. So yeah, we're here to talk about NPCs. And I got a couple of opinions because I like different opinions, if you know what I mean. I don't want to just look at one side of it. I want to look at what a lot of other people say about it. So I found it wasn't hard to find somebody who said it's BS.
actually, I would have to disagree with that.
So how would you define a non-player character?
So an NPC to me is someone who is an empty shell just going through the motions of life. They have no essence or drive. So basically, it'd almost be like a zombie state to where they're being almost driven by what seems like someone telling them what they should be doing or what they should be eating. They don't have thoughts for themselves. They don't do anything for themselves. And in metaphysics, we just call them empty shells walking around. And so if you have an ability to like scan and feel the energy of people, when you come across an NPC, you won't have anything to scan. They don't resonate in energy. So it's like you're looking at someone, but if you're going by energy alone, you would think you were alone, even though there is someone there. So they do live amongst us, they do walk amongst us, and no, they're not an alien. It's just somehow, some way they just. I have a theory about it, but I'm not sure why they are and how they exist.
So one of the things I know my mom had said to me when I was quite young is that she said that there are soulless people. And if there was anybody who would, if she were living today, she would really be struggling. But she very, very strict in her belief system as far as, God and Christianity, etc. So it was interesting for me to even hear her say that. She says, well, yes, who you're describing, she goes, oh, they sound like a soulless person. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And I think ultimately what she meant was that they had no spirit about them. And I don't think she would really be able to put into words what she felt. She wasn't talking about somebody who would be, uh, have like a negative energy, that they were soulless. She was talking about somebody who just wasn't there. You know what I mean? It's almost like she just said they were soulless, and it's almost like what you just described, is that they're just kind of there. Hey,
Right.
Stone. Stone's in the chat, in the YouTube chat.
Hello. And Right, and one of the things is when we look at stories of like police took like 10 bullets to stop someone from going from hurting anyone. And they're like, and they just didn't seem normal. That to me is an NPC. They're programmed to do something. They don't feel like we feel because they're empty shell. There's nothing in them. It's almost like they're just an operational piece on the board that's filling space right now and got activated and can be turned off.
So you don't think that that's not part of what they're talking about as far as programming? I mean, you can program someone, and I'm not talking about just like a little hypnosis trick. This is definitely through trauma-based, programming. I'll just put it that way. That they people will have that trigger word or that trigger phrase, and they're going to carry out that particular operation that they were programmed to do. And it could be very complex, or it could be something that would be very simple.
Right, you're talking to like a Manchurian candidate.
Mhm.
And those do exist and can be programmed. And in the programming, you can be programmed to not feel the pain,
Mhm.
not feel anything. And so you would never know if you were shot, stabbed. You would just keep going until your mission was done. And then when mission's complete, you get switched off and you can die from your wounds.
Yeah.
And nobody will ever know you were programmed to do that. So it is possible to program someone to feel nothing. The only thing that I question and I talk with a lot of people about with hypnosis is they always say in hypnosis, you cannot make someone do something against their will. But I can't help but feel like they break you, program you that those personality rules that you have may be erased in that situation. And so, therefore, they can program you to do something that you would never do.
Right. It's almost like a circumstantial situation. It's not even really necessarily erased, but it's put aside as soon as you make that switch. You now have a different set of rules once you've completed that particular set of rules or missions, or however you wanted to say that, that is now complete. You switch back to this other set of rules that you now have set up, and you never would have done these other things. And that kind of opens up a whole another can of worms. The thing with yeah, the whole thing with the NPCs is, I think, which the guy that said he thinks it's BS, the one website, he says there's no scientific evidence for these NPCs, but how do we explain people that don't have an internal dialogue? That just blew my mind. It's like, really? How does that happen? I would probably fall asleep in a heartbeat and then wake up to the alarm. And I don't do that.
See,
And
the
I have
problem is,
dreams. They don't have dreams either.
right, and the problem is there is science about it, but the science is provided to us in a form that people easily dismiss. And by that, I mean, if I wanted to say, if someone asked me, is there science to prove non-playable characters? I would say, look at the Jason Bourne trilogy. He was living a normal life. He got broken, recovered memories of another life, and was able to use weapons, able to survive, to kill to survive and learned that he had done assassinations. All the while, his normal personality is a calm demeanor. Not who you would expect is going around and, you know, diving in water, going on boats, killing people, getting out before being caught, and bank accounts all over. It's like, there's so they're in a way is they're showing you the science. They can make you exist and not exist easily by paper trails. And you have no idea it's out there.
Um, that actually popped in my head of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie,
Total
which was
Recall.
way before the whole Bourne thing. And I think what people are looking for is something that's more generally accepted as a scientific evidence. And just like with a lot of the other things that are being denied, downplayed, ignored, that's where a lot of the problem lies in the people's theories. Give me the guy's name. It's called Medium, I think. Yeah, it's just medium.com. And he talks about NPCs. He said there's a movie coming out. I don't gotta see. I don't know if it's out already. Oh, yes, it's already out. So it's a movie called Free Guy.
Is that
Main
with
guy,
Ryan Reynolds?
Ryan Reynolds, is an
Okay.
NPC.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he realizes he's an NPC. And if you are, how do you realize something? Do you know what I mean?
So let's say your life exists in your single, you wake up in the morning, you eat your breakfast, you get washed, you get ready, you go to work, you come home, you get the same, you get, say, you go to a noodle shop for dinner. Go home, you watch the same program every night and go to sleep. You wake up, you eat the same breakfast, get washed, go to work, go to dinner at the same noodle place, watch the same thing. That's where you're a non-playable character. You have a routine that doesn't change, and everything is a repeat. You don't like, so for example, when you go to a restaurant and say the waitress sees you walk up and goes, "Here's your dinner." Well, how did you know what I wanted? You order the same thing every day here. That's not normal. Normal people vary their routine, vary their tastes. They don't have a taste for the same dish every day, every meal. That is statistically impossible, actually.
So I think that there are possibly, because the NPCs that we're thinking about in like video games, they don't have that breakable loop. Because let's face it, if you're doing an RPG game, you're going to sit there and be that character. You also have limits. You have some things that you can do based on the skill level you've achieved, or what tools you have, or the skills that you have to build these tools. There are certain areas that you probably don't want to go into because you'd probably get a little reset. But the other characters that are involved around you, they all have a the same rote routine like what you just described. The more clever games that are starting to come out is like, even with Assassin's Creed, with some of the endings, depending on your choices, you'll have, I can't remember, I think it's like 7 different outcomes. based on the choices that you make in that game.
Right.
So that I think is also part of these non-players.
Right.
But
And
it's I think what we're comparing this to a game which is far more simplistic than where we are at right now.
so one way to look at it is, so you're walking down a street, let's say, and you see someone walking towards you. They have perfect, let's just say for hypothetically, they have perfect posture. They, they're focused straight ahead. They're not looking around. They're just walking down the street. And you're walking towards them and you walk right past them and you bump them and they just keep walking, turn the corner, and when you go to say, "Excuse me," they're not there. That's an NPC because a normal person, if you bump them, would, react. They would say, "Excuse me," or, "Sorry I was in your way," or something. But to have no reaction is not normal. I mean, you can be in your thoughts, and if you bump into someone, you're going to instantly be in that moment and go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Didn't mean to bump into you." So
So,
that's an
you know,
example. And
yeah, that even brings up the whole idea of this being tied into the simulation theory, which I'm not convinced of. I think that this is something that's part of the programming to more or less lower our view of who and what we are. Um, but when you're in those video games, and I know it's been mentioned in science, they're saying that these telescopes, when they look out into what they're calling space, they're saying, now granted, this is what they're saying, who's seeing this, I don't know. But what they're saying is that just like in a video game, when you fly over an area, you'll notice, or when you're quickly riding through an area, that the fill-in stuff comes in, trees, grass, it'll grow up, and the trees will manifest, even details on buildings. You go quick enough that you can see the stuff grow. And they're saying that ultimately that's what they observed in outer space. Now, I don't know if that's like trickery that they introduce this gaming systems that are sophisticated enough, and that's how they're working it to make the system work faster because it's only going to populate that data. It can't hold all that data, you know, up and fully formed, and that's how the system is able to run. It would be too much information. You'd probably need a gaming system as big as a freaking house to hold all the information that's fully formed. It collapses it and doesn't keep it active. So that's what they're saying that games are run like. Now they come up with this idea of that's where we're at. That's what we're experiencing. And I don't know if that's kind of some trickery that I'd like to say a different word because it's kind of messing with people, I think.
and that sounds like programming within programming. And I can't say that I've seen that. I've looked through telescopes and never had that effect, but you got me thinking about when I'm driving, when I'm in the city and doing like 30, 35 to 45, everything going by me is somewhat blurry. I get on the highway where you can do here in Texas where I live, you can do 80, 85 miles in some places, everything you can make out details of what you're going by, like how many trees did you go by? It seems like everything slows down, actually. And so started wondering one day, are we designed to actually move faster? And that's why everything seems slower the faster we go, because that's our normal pace. Whereas going slow, it's our mind is too slow, so it can't make out what's there. Hence, everything is blurry. And you couldn't tell how many trees you went by because they seem to be just a quick go by. And so I'm not saying, that means, simulation or not. It's just something I noticed and seems like along your theory, except in the reverse, to where the faster you're going, the more things are in perspective. And it often makes me wonder the race car drivers, that are going 200 plus miles an hour on those loop tracks or weave tracks, depending on which cars. If that's how they're able to do it, because the faster they're going, the more clear everything is around them. And so they can make decisions faster because they can see clearly what's going on.
Well, think about the jet pilots. I mean, they have technology where they're hooking their brains up to react to what they see. It's not just a reflex anymore, and their vision has to be exceptionally good. They have to have reflexes that the normal or average individual does not have. Their vision, their how they process things is very different than what most other people can handle.
Right.
So when you think about that, some of them are going, Mach 1, Mach 2, God only knows how quick. So it supersedes the ability of reflex if you think about it. You're basically in, Mach 1,000 miles an hour, 2,000 miles an hour. Uh, how wide is from east to west the United States? Be pretty dang skippy quick.
Yeah.
So
And to be able to, and the amazing thing is, talking about that technology now enables us to bomb precisely. But if you go back and look at like World War II, they're looking through a scope and able to say, this is the city, there's the building, drop now, and be able to get, maybe 80% accuracy on target.
yeah,
Now, how is
that
that
doesn't matter what.
possible?
You'd have to have somebody who knew obviously your altitude and your speed and what that would do as far as the trajectory of whatever it was that you were dropping.
Right, but I'm meaning able to see the target thousands of feet or mile beneath you. Well, thousands of feet because I don't think they went into the miles yet. But still, I mean, let's look at, you look at an airplane today, you can't even make out what color a house is. But these people could determine buildings and targets. And so to me, you can easily say, well, intelligence gave them photos, they circled, the target, memorized what it looked like. But when you're thousands of feet up under the pressure of people shooting at you and not wanting to make a mistake, you gotta have nerves of beyond steel to go, here's the target, drop, and be accurate, comfortable under that pressure. Because, I mean, I don't care how good you are, when bullets start whizzing by you, most people's reaction would be to panic and push early. or try to save themselves. And so, to be able to just sit in your seat and go, not yet, stay on target, not yet, is incredible. And I have much respect for the bombardiers of World War II, all sides, that they were able to do that. And
Wasn't even all during the day either. They were doing a lot of that stuff at night.
right,
So that's even, that has to be again at an altitude and a time and speed is, and you get, that's all like a calculation. I mean, it definitely has to be calculated. And
yep,
as they also they would go through so much training though that yeah, once you get into the fray, you do have to have those nerves of steel,
yeah,
but
it's like
that's what the
second
training
nature.
is.
It
It
becomes
becomes, yep,
you're
yeah,
you're literally programmed to do it. They're literally programming you under any conditions to be able to do it.
yeah.
And what's
Well, and
interesting
but
is,
they're not NPCs, I would hope.
well, it depends, because when you're sitting in the chair and say a fighter pilot just whizzed by and the bullets, if you never moved and your face was on that scope, I would say at that moment you've been programmed to be an NPC, because nobody is not going to react to that. And if you're not reacting, and what I was going to say is another example of NPCs, and I know this is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but in the 1700s, 1800s, look at our soldiers that fought in wars. What did they do? They walked in two line columns straight towards each other, fired at each other, and kept and just stood there and just kept shooting until one side walked away. You can't tell me those aren't NPCs at that point, because nobody seeing your friend or comrade lose a limb, or their blood spatter on you, is not going to go and sit there for a moment and go, oh my God, what the hell am I going through? What the hell just happened? But these soldiers were literally programmed to march up, fire, reload, fire, reload, fire until given the command to stop.
Yep.
And the officers, they were programmed not to target officers, because the officers gave the orders to the NPCs.
So you know what
And
it reminded me of this whole thing of what you're talking about, that the NPCs were those guys in the lines. But I also believe that individuals who were not NPCs would also be programmed into that and would have those thoughts of what the hell am I doing here? Because I have a family member who said that to me when they were they weren't a police officer, but they were in like a county level. Because state, county, and local all have different responsibilities, but these were county, and they were responsible for trying to prevent a riot. And my family member ended up having all the riot gear on and locked in arms with his comrades and heading towards the fires, the violence, the craziness. And they told me when they were walking down the street, they all of a sudden thought to themselves, what the hell am I doing and how did I get here? So it's almost like he went through all of that and realized that this is what I have to do in these circumstances. This is what I was trained to do. I mean, that's not running through his head. He's just going through this learning, what he had learned. And then after that process had gotten to a certain point, kind of, that thought just slammed into him. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, they were okay and everything, and it was kind of settled down, but I guess the point is that thankfully that family member is not an NPC, but we can still go through those programs, and I would have to say the same thing for myself. I go through certain processes and sit there and take a step back, and it's like I don't believe in the things that I have to partake in, but I have to do what I have to do to keep other people safe. And that's almost what they were doing. They were going through what they needed to do to what they were programmed to do to keep other people safe.
Right.
So
Now,
that's why I think it's really hard to delineate between an NPC and someone else. I mean, they have character and personality, but they don't have, I think the big thing is no inner dialogue.
so I think the illusion is when we say an NPC is that they are 24/7 NPC. I don't think that's the reality. I think, like, for example, soldiers, fighting the wars of like 1812, the Revolutionary War. They, I would say, were not NPCs because they were all, they would run and they would react to what's going on and panic, and they had to be trained. They didn't have training. And I'm, of course, referring to the American side, but the American side trained to the land that they were on. The British didn't. And so when it came to like marching in columns and they would engage like what we call guerrilla tactics, where they would attack them while marching, you would see them panic because this isn't the way it's done. This isn't normal warfare. It's almost like you would say this wasn't fair.
Yeah.
Fair is face to face open field, which numerous people said of the Revolutionary War. This was madness to go toe to toe, face to face, open field. You're just asking for a massacre. That's foolish. You got to use the land around you if you're going to overpower your opponent. So they were thinking, but they weren't like thinking in the terms of, okay, if we do this, this will happen. If we do that, this would happen. No, they're just trying to think, how can we win? With the orders we're given, we have to follow orders. And when they were trained at Valley Forge, they say that's when the war turned because we were no longer pitchfork farmers. We were no longer tobacco farmers or lawyers or shopkeepers. They were soldiers. Well, what happened? They were trained to march. They were trained to lean on each other. They were trained to support the person next to you. And if someone missed an order, they gave them, they repeated the order to them. And so they all would be ready. And they were trained to say, when the command fixed bayonets comes, you're going to charge in. You're going to hand to hand combat the enemy. This is not a person. This is the enemy. That's how they were trained to override because nobody wanted to commit murder, which in essence war is. Both sides committing murder.
Yeah, sanctioned, legalized, so to speak.
But because they tell you this is the enemy, your mind goes, well, I'm defending myself from my enemy. So therefore, killing them keeps me safe. I can kill them. That's how they overrode the programming of the individual because they no longer said, "Hey, look, Charlie's over there. I remember drinking with him at a pub."
Now it has to move
Charlie
quicker,
didn't exist anymore. It was,
right?
that's the enemy.
Yeah. And that was a hard thing to overcome, but you made an interesting point that if people did do that, I mean, and there were some people that didn't want, they always portrayed it in the movies that, oh, they were cowards, etc. It's like, no, some of them were even in, well, I can't remember what the name of the film was. It wasn't Gary Cooper, was it? I can't remember. Very old film, but it was about a conscientious objector, and supposedly it's a real story. I'm not 100% sure, but he was a conscientious objector, and they talked to him. He ended up signing up. He got assigned. He ended up being one of the most decorated individuals, or one of the more decorated individuals, but the one thing is that you mentioned about you have these large groups of individuals coming toward one another in war, or conflicts, because we've got to kind of probably watch our terminology here. What it makes me kind of laugh, and dragging back into the NPC thing, when they were first making the Lord of the Rings movies, one of the programs that was quite new, if you think about when this was being made, was a long time ago now. Um, they had developed, and it was brand new. What do you call it? A program, I guess, that used
CGI.
large numbers for individuals. So they had to figure out a way to computerize large, because they wanted to have those big conflicts where you'd have the woods up there and you see those characters coming together and this, this confrontation between the orcs and these humans and hobbits and whatnot. And what's interesting is when they first were in development of this program, it was called Massive, and they said, "Oh, well, this is wrong. We got to fix that." But what they had was these automated characters. They only made, like maybe five or six different kinds, and they just kind of made them as a mass so it would look organic, but they would have characters running the opposite direction, just random. You'd see guys running from the middle of them, getting close to the line, and they would just kind of run off. And it's like, we got to fix it. It's like, no, because that's what real battle and conflict looks like. People will freak out. The characters were freaking out. They got
Yeah.
lost.
Seeing one of the things that I think really portrayed that was, I don't know if you remember the movie Patriot with Mel Gibson.
I never watched it, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, there's a scene in there where he's in charge of the militia and he goes up to the commanding officer and says, "Put us in the center. We'll fire two shots and we'll run." And he goes, "Well, that's what we always do. Why should I do that?" And he goes, "Because that's what they expect us to do. Now, if you put your army behind us, you'll catch them in a run and they won't be able to stop and fire because they're not trained to shoot on the run." He had figured this out and said, "We will put them in a run. You will drop when we cross this hill because you'll be hidden, and they will come face to face with you, ready to fire, and you will take them by surprise and you'll win." And that's what ended up happening because the Red Coat Army was running across with bayonets and all of a sudden stop and freeze because they don't know what to do to a bunch of muskets from regulars pointing right at them, ready to fire already. It was like, wait a minute, this isn't how this happens. And the general of the British side said we had to sound retreat. And at the end of the movie, he says, and at the end of the battle, he's like, what does this war come to? This was a rabble that just beat us. And that's where it showed, wait a minute, the NPCs broke the program and said, we know what you want us to do. We know what you expect us to do. So we're going to use that against you. And it worked. And it redefined warfare because no longer was it the civilized warfare of face to face, the first to retreat loses, or the one with the most casualties loses. It became who could outsmart the other side and take the day. And that's where Washington came about, was because he was emotionally driven. You could say NPC mode. New York was his end all be all. He wanted to retake New York. That was his victory plan. Take New York, force them to surrender. And everybody was sitting there saying to him, we got him on the run in the South. Let's beat him in the South. We can come up north with better arms, better men, and take the field. But he was like, no. And then finally, the Navy came in and they go, we can't support you at New York. We can support you here in Virginia on this town where Cornwallis is supposedly headquartered, but we can't support you here in New York because our ships can't get through the river. They can't get through en masse. They're going to be sitting ducks against the British Navy. It's not going to work. So finally, Washington heard this and said, all right, let's take them at Yorktown. And that's how we won the war, was they broke even Washington's programming and said, Yorktown, that's the place to get the victory and the war because that is their only army in the South. And if we take it, we take the entire South, and they have only one army in the North, where we now have our Southern and Northern army combined, and we got our French allies. So they're literally going to be overwhelmed 3-1. And Washington said, you're right. And that's how the tide turned.
So even with all of, like you said, it broke Washington's programming, and that's 100% that you don't have to be an NPC to have programming. You just have to have that programming that can sometimes show itself as something that it would be a normal structure, pattern, or habit that you would be carrying out based on whatever your options were at that point. So I'm kind of, as you're saying this, I'm kind of reading through this article that this guy wrote on medium.com. And he said, ultimately, the only one who is playable is you. So to other people, you know, you're the NPC. You could be driving in your car, passing somebody, and you could glance at them as they're driving by, and you will never see that individual again. Just in your world, that individual is an NPC. They're just there and highlighted and gone. So I guess to me that, that aspect of it doesn't really fit the definition of NPC though,
Well, it
because
does actually, because,
but we have internal dialogue.
right, but to ourselves. I can't dialogue for you. I can't say what you're thinking, what you're going through, what your routine is. I don't know. So that's how you would be an NPC to me, is because I can only control myself. I can control my thoughts. I can control how I'm feeling, how I'm perceiving, but I can't control any of that for you. So I can't sit here and go, okay, Auric, now you're going to click the button, close that window, and you're going to pat your head 3 times. It's not going to work. However, if you were to say to yourself, okay, I'm done, I feel like, patting my head. That's you. I had nothing to do with that. I can't make you do anything. That's how you are an NPC to me, and I'm an NPC to you. Is the term non-playable character means the person that's playable, you determine what happens to. I don't determine what happens to you. I can't, when I finish this episode with you, I don't sit there and go, okay, Auric's now gonna, upload this. She's then gonna go eat dinner, watch a movie, then she's gonna go to bed. I don't know that that's what you're gonna do. I can't make you do anything. You're not playable to me. I can't set you in any motion to do anything. Only you can. So in essence, that's how you are a non-playable character to my environment, and everybody is because I can only be responsible for my actions, my perceptions, my take, and my reactions. I can't determine what's going to happen with everybody around me because I don't know. I can go outside and go for a walk, and 3 people maybe wanting to walk their dog and be like, oh, well, our dogs are going to react to that guy. We have to go the other way. I didn't tell them they had to go the other way. They
I thought
determined
you
that.
said you couldn't influence anything. You couldn't control others. You say the dog just walked.
I know. I saw that.
So that's perfect timing to she's gonna like really mess me up. Sorry, camera's probably gonna jiggle a little bit. But no, it's kind of interesting that you say that because I think we can con I think we can control others. And I don't think we need to be able to necessarily, we don't have to be there. We don't have to, hopefully she didn't switch anything off. I don't know. She's like a bull in a china shop. But as far as controlling others, I think we can. And we don't need to see them. Um, we definitely can influence others, either directly or indirectly. I don't know that those aspects of life are necessarily something that you would categorize as an NPC. I guess the one thing that I'm kind of hung up on is this radically different, because I think even the NPC, even if you consider that, so if someone drives by me, I'll use that scenario again. Someone drives by me, I glance at them, and they're gone. The way that person looked, or even if if I caught their eye, there may be something that would be recognizable in that person that as they pass by could remind me of something. So that could be an influence on me. I mean, the tendrils can get really deep. So I guess as far as being an influence and controlling others, you can definitely influence other people, and you don't have to be next to them, see them, or say anything to them, especially if you're someone who is aware of the quantum physics and the entanglement about our thoughts, our things, they're physical things, they're physical, not some etherical thing. They're actually physical things that have power. Um, the difference between all of that crazy bit of business is that if thoughts are power and NPCs don't have an inner monologue or an inner dialogue, that's probably why you're not catching on or able to recognize them, to know that they're there. They do not influence you. They're just like you said before, they're a shell. So that kind of is a little bit different. There is something, there has to be something there. There's the biology in and of itself that gets really deep too. So I guess the inhabitor, and I don't like it when people call what we are these vessels meat suits. That's not a no. I think that's very disrespectful to these this vessel that we have that we've been gifted with, and it's our job to take care of it. And that I think is different to the NPC. How much, it's not to say they can't reason, but it's like their learning seems to be rote. And there's no discussion, debate, there's no lateral thinking, there's no problem solving. They have to be told how to do things and how it works. But I don't think you have to repeat it a lot to most people that have no internal dialogue. I think they have to get it and get it quick. Otherwise, they're going to be worse than duck soup, if you know what I mean. So I
Right.
mean that
And
you opened up a lot of tendrils on that.
well, and another aspect of that that you may not realize is so say, you're driving down the road and this gentleman drives past you. You were thinking about, oh, I had this episode with Michael. Well, I am now on your mind. You look at the car next to you and you're like, you'll do a double take and go, oh my God, that almost looked, I think that was Michael. But Michael doesn't live here. It's because your mind was thinking about me, so it matrixed the image of the person driving by to look like me because that's what your mind was thinking, perceiving, visualizing. So it created the image going by, and that's what happens sometimes. And so it's not that they influence you into something, it's you may already be there and they just brought it even stronger awareness to it. So they actually had no role in making you think about something or remembering something. It was you were already in that process, and your mind just utilized that moment to solidify it and go, yes, this is what we need to think about. This is what we got to prepare for. So therefore, you're like, huh, I know that's not Michael, but that really looked like him because you're already in that process. So the NPC wasn't me, didn't put up a face shield that says, hey, look, here's Michael's picture so that you'll remember. They didn't think, oh, she's thinking about Michael. Let's put a picture of Michael up. So that's where I say, influence is not meaning an NPC is not an NPC. Influence comes in many ways we have not even fully developed our understanding of. And even now, we're influencing each other by this conversation unintentionally.
No, it's intentional.
But I mean, that's where, you know, I stand by and saying, like, I can't make anyone think about anything. I can plant a seed, and later, they may go, hey, I remember this episode I watched 3 months ago where somebody was talking about something. What was it? And it starts them looking and going, okay, who was it? And they'll flip through episodes and go, that's the episode. Yeah, now I remember what I was. what he said and what they were talking about. Now it makes sense. Well, it's not that we did anything. It's just every episode I view as the audience has a little seed of potential information that is provided by the guest and me, and it may grow into a full thought. They may go research it, or it may just wither and die and disintegrate. Has no effect on me because my role was to plant the seed. My role was not to make you think and go research something this very moment. It was to plant the idea. And that's where NPCs versus PCs, playable characters, are different. Is you can walk up to an NPC and say, you are more than what you are programmed to be, and walk away. And that NPC will sit there and be like, I'm just going to go through my day and everything. And then one day may sit there and go, you know, I was told once I was more than I was programmed to be. I wonder what they mean by that. And start to look at what all they could do versus what they are doing. So then that NPC no longer is an NPC, it becomes a PC, playable character. I didn't make them a playable character. You don't make them a playable character. They choose it when they decide to.
So having no internal dialogue or inner monologue is different than an NPC because an NPC would never have that conversation within themselves.
An
Because there's no
NPC,
internal monologue. They wouldn't be able to have that kind of thought process. That thought process doesn't exist. They wouldn't even question. Well, they would just sit there and it wouldn't compute. It's one of those kind of things. So maybe what you're looking at as someone who has, I guess like maybe a sleeper or somebody who is that you, like you said, you did influence. So to me, that an NPC is still someone who doesn't have that kind of influence within themselves. They can't influence themselves. They don't have that lateral thought process. They don't have that questioning curiosity. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And the one thing you did point out though too is about the um recognizing someone on the road and thinking that it was someone that you had met earlier. Your brain, when you have when I would look at you in this image that I see, and I'm driving down the road, and I don't even have to be thinking about you. I just have this image that's now in my brain of what you look like. And if someone drives by that has just enough physical characteristics that when I see it, my brain is going to take the quickest and easiest track for safety to match what I just saw. And that is going to most quickly go to that little synapse that's developed. It's going to seek it out and it's going to go, oh, he reminds me of Michael. So that's kind of what your brain does. I mean, they now have these really cool images that you can see when you learn something completely new. There's like it like grow, it's like this little circle of light and it starts growing like little crazy legs on it, and it's desperately trying to connect with something else that's similar. And I mean, they obviously, I'm thinking they slowed this image down, but it grows, it seeks out something that matches it. So that's kind of like a brain function of what matches that. Whether that's a characteristic of what an NPC has, what I have in my mind of what one is, but I believe that the classic meme idea of an NPC is, they don't have that. If you look at what the NPC is in the gaming, they don't have that. You can create a character that looks totally different. You know, you can go in the next time and go put a scar and change their clothes and the color of their skin. That NPC is still going to react to you. There's as that, if you didn't change the name, they're still going to react to you that way. They have their rote little world, and that's how it's going to go.
Well,
I don't know the difference there, but to me, I think I'm kind of hung up on the idea of the not having that inner monologue. If you don't have the inner monologue, somebody has to tell you, unless
well,
it's something pre-programmed.
here's an example of a playable character turned into an NPC, and that may help you come with a little bit of that. And that is look at people who are in abusive relationships or trafficked. They go through a process of being told, no one's looking for you, no one's going to help you, you're on your own. I'm the only one that's going to take care of you. You do what I say. They're drilled and scared into them. No thinking. Don't do anything you're not that I don't tell you to do. You do anything I tell you not to do, we'll kill you. So your preservation takes over and you become this just shell of a person that just does what you're told. If you're told to go into this store and return this item, you're going to go in the store, return the item, and walk out. You're not going to do anything out of the ordinary because your life is at stake. And being told so many times the same message, you're going to stop thinking for yourself because you're going to sit there and go, if I think something and I do something wrong, they're going to kill me. No one's going to come and save me. And so that's why when you see people who are rescued, they are they shudder back. They don't run to the rescuer. They don't run to the person that's they know, like family or loved ones. They shudder back because they're afraid this is an illusion. They're not really here and they are completely shut down. They don't have the thought process of going, oh my God, my mom or my family member or my husband or my wife came to get me.
So
They
you're
don't have
actually
it.
just you're describing something similar to what they call the Stockholm syndrome, where people actually who are held were held hostage protected the the people that held them hostage. They protected them.
No, I'm not necessarily saying they protect the person
But
holding
that,
them
but
hostage. Um,
it's a trauma. They're both trauma based behaviors.
yeah,
They're both reacting to
it's almost
because
like an
they
amnesia.
were yeah they were controlled in this environment, but they were treated kindly. But they still had guns, and if you stepped outside of that, you're gone. They still had that, but because they were treated nicely as opposed to this other trauma, because they're both traumas, that they were in fear. This was a fear-based.
Well, it's a
So it's the
learned
same.
response
It's a
because
learned
let's
response. Yeah.
if you were to say to somebody, I don't want to do this, and they're like, you're going to do this, and you say, no, I don't want to, they're going to hit you, possibly even beat you till you're nearly dead. And then the next time they're going to say, you're going to do this. You're going to think twice before you say, no, I'm not. Because
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I don't want to get beaten.
Mm-hmm.
So you learn to go along with, and you learn how to survive in a way. So you become an NPC because your only thought is survival. You don't have any other thought. You don't have any other emotions, anything. You are strictly, what do I do to survive? That is an NPC because you don't have any free thought, like you're saying. You have no inner dialogue. You have no outer dialogue. You are just a being walking around going through motion to survive. That's an NPC.
So it's almost like there are even levels of functioning within an NPC because uh, if you're a soul-bearing individual, does that mean your soul leaves you? I mean, this gets into a real metaphysical question because if that inner dialogue stops and you're going to do, you've had this learning regardless of what, how they got you to do it, um, you are now different to that person that you had mentioned earlier, who you didn't feel any kind of energy force or anything like that. Do you know what I mean?
I
We talk
do, and
about
if
the
you
soulless,
remember,
yeah.
yeah, and if you remember earlier, I said not all NPCs are 24/7 NPC. And you kind of looked at me like, what? That's what I was referring to. Some people are turned into NPCs under certain conditions. They become an NPC to survive.
But it's that there is a difference between that empty shell of someone who was born that way, who does not have any kind of ability to function outside of what they've been told, even with, this is without any kind of trauma base. So they had none of that. And you mentioned that they don't have that energy, that you can't really feel that they're present. Does that mean that that individual who goes through a process, that that aspect of self is now gone, that soul essence is now gone? Do you know what I did? That spirit essence is now gone. Does it
Uh,
leave? Because I've heard people talk
It,
about being able to um, see that cord and see that that essence is outside of you, out of um, preservation. And it doesn't have to be an NPC. It's just a lot of us, when we, it's just out of protection, it will go out.
so having a spirit inside isn't necessary 24/7 to function and be a playable character. Your spirit can come and go. Hence, we go to the astral plane. We go to different places, different times, different everything, but we still function. We still operate. So we don't have to have the spirit in us 24/7. Now, with that being said, when you have a non playable character that's brought up that way, they're being brought up programmed to be a non playable character. The parents, whether they realize it or not, are raising their child to have no thoughts, no cares, no anything, just do what we tell you. And what happens when they graduate from school and go out in the real world? They have no idea how to function. They are like a 2-year old let loose in a candy store because all these stimuluses are around them. They have no concept of, no knowledge to help cope with it. So they branch out. Some may go into seclusion and become hermits, afraid of everything. Some may lash out and hence become criminals. Some learn balance after a while and functionable. It's all depending on how the person adapts for their own survival's sake at the end. They're programmed, but they still have their own spirit that says, no, this is what we're going to do. And they're driven to those aspects. So that's why when you say, like how they're brought up, it does create the NPC in another way. Is the student goes to school, they come home, they have no friends, they do their homework, they eat their dinner, they go to sleep because the parents don't want to interact with them, they don't want anything to do with them. So the child becomes lonely, creates its own world inside of itself, and hence, starts theoretically hearing voices and interacting with spirits that are around and not realizing they're talking to the other side and thinking they're
Mhm.
all imaginary friends.
Yep,
And this gift doesn't go away. And so the parents drug them because they think their imagination's gone wild and they can't control them anymore. So they drug them, make them controllable. But what they didn't realize is because the kid was lonely, learned to tap into another existence.
yep. Yeah,
And
Stone
so
said,
that was a gift they robbed from that individual. And
well,
so,
it's a survival mechanism though, too, for the child. Stone said no childhood discipline, another version of the psychological experiment, which is true too. I mean, they could you could talk for like 6 hours on all this stuff.
yeah. But I think in the bottom line is though is NPCs are individuals who I feel like were never taught to think for themselves and so are very susceptible to anyone telling them what to do and are easily programmed to do things. That's why you'll see in movies where someone is like one day and goes, "Hey, we got ourselves someone who will do exactly what we want them to do because they were taught just to obey. They weren't taught to think for themselves. And then they kidnap somebody who was taught to think for themselves. And they're like, it's taking us days to break this person to do what we want them to do."
Yeah, and there this gets but this is done on a very subtle scale, what you're touching on now, even right down to the lighting that we use, the food that we eat, the water that we drink, the radiation that we're all exposed to from the different devices that we have in and around our homes. It's the fluorescent lighting has a flicker rate that's like 90, and I think the human flicker rate in the eye and through into the brain is something like 20 or 30. So it can actually make you more malleable. So these are all things that are contributing to that not being um, able, even for many people, to think for themselves.
Right. And when we talk about, soulless versus having a soul, we base that on the definition that a soul is someone who is trying to grow, learning, communicating, expressing itself, basically by definition being a sentient being. A soulless one doesn't do that. And it's not that, and soulless doesn't mean they don't have a soul. It just means they don't have the connection to it. That's been severed and they don't know how to fix it. Nobody's ever told them, hey, you were this bright kid that, this, art was your connection to who you are. Or writing books was, who you were. That was all taken from them. So they don't know that. So they don't know how to connect with themselves. And that's what makes them the NPC, is because they don't know how to take care of themselves and relate to themselves to be able to function. They need someone to do that. And I want to make something clear right now is when I use that definition, I'm not talking about autistic or special needs kids. That is something totally different. They are not NPCs. They are not soulless people without a connection to their soul. Their connection is way different from ours. More advanced, I think, personally. But I just wanted to make that clear so someone didn't sit there and go, oh, he's talking about these people. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm referring to normal everyday people who go about functioning. And one example I think that makes a really good example of the NPCs is the movie Matrix, where you see the, if you remember the scene with the woman in the red dress, where they're talking about who can be an agent. Well, the real message there wasn't that the lady, turned into the agent because they were in color. It was that everybody else around was oblivious to what's going on and just going through their daily routines, going through the motions of their lives, and don't care whatsoever what's happening to you. I mean, look at all the people he bumped into. They didn't care. They just kept going about their business, doing what they wanted to do. That's the NPC. They're
That's New York City.
self-absorbed into their own world and don't care what's
Yeah,
going on around them. To
yeah.
me, that's the truest definition of the NPC, is they are so self-absorbed that the rest of the world doesn't exist to them. All that matters is themselves.
Yep, that's true. That's for sure true.
And that's, I think, what the true message of the Matrix was waking up people to realize you are letting other people use you to do things, hence become the agents, and you don't care. And even the one guy that was free said, you'll put me back in and make me a rich guy. He's like, I don't care what you do as long as I'm this. It's like, what was his message? I want to be all about me.
Mm-hmm,
You make it all about me, I'll give you the keys to the kingdom.
mm-hmm,
He sold his soul, in essence, to be rich
mm-hmm,
and self absorbed.
mm-hmm.
Whereas Neo and all the freedom fighters, what were they doing? They were struggling to free everybody else, to show everybody else there's another way.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting you bring that up because we do have that awakening, hopefully, that people will realize that they do have choices. We do have more choices than you can imagine. Yeah,
Yeah,
so that would
you'll love this. I was on a talk with a friend who's a shamanistic practitioner, and she said, I had a vision of a fulcrum and a compass, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I said, really? Because a fulcrum is a balancer, and if you stand it straight up, it's like this. That's you. And she goes, okay. I said, now take the compass, put it on top, What does a compass show you? Shows you the way. Think about Pirates of the Caribbean. What was Jack Sparrow's compass? It'll only direct you to what you want. Not north, not south, but what you want. So when you put that compass on the fulcrum, it's showing you you have 360-degree choice to do whatever you want. You can go forward, change your mind, turn right, change your mind, go back, go forward on another angle. You can go left, you can go up, you can go down, you can go anywhere you want to go. It's all choice. That's our life. We're the fulcrum, and the compass is just directing us where to go based on what we choose and where we want to go. And where we want to go isn't always where we want to go. But the universe knows where we really need to go and really want to go, so it's going to direct you there. And what I mean by that is I may want to go right to this really nice restaurant, but straight ahead is a friend that I haven't seen in years. And the universe will say, you need to go see your friend, connect with them, and you may end up in that restaurant that you wanted to go to. Or you may end up realizing this talk made you realize, I don't need to go to that restaurant. This place over here has way better food than that restaurant does, and we have a better time over here. Which was the right choice? It was all what you wanted, but it wasn't necessarily looking like what you wanted. So that's where I tell everyone be careful when you look at and ask the universe for what you want because it may not always come in how you expect it to look.
Well, most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it's just totally different to what you expected. The other interesting thing too is that we make these decisions and like you said, we think we want something and whether it's something you can achieve or not is irrelevant, is a lot of times it's very uncomfortable to make that happen.
Right.
You know, that's, you can use something that's very, lighthearted, like the visiting your friend or going to a restaurant for most of the time, the impact in doing something that's really meaningful to change your life and to overcome this aspect of possibly that is all of us in avoiding being an NPC as much as we can and regaining that kind of control, whether that's feasible or not, I don't know, but maybe a good example would be the decision for me to change from one job to another. I really enjoy working as being a mental health uh, a caseworker because you help people get through life that's very difficult for them. It was a scary as all get out kind of a job, because you're not exactly working with people that most society thinks of as nice people. I thought they were all awesome, but hey, now I don't do that. I'm a supervisor over a day program of, so it's completely different that I wanted to get away from doing that because it's physically draining and it's mentally draining. There's a lot of travel involved. So I wanted to do something different. I thought, well, I have management experience, supervisor experience. That was a difficult choice to make. That was a very, very difficult choice to make. I didn't go to that restaurant that was close. I could have stayed in a job. You could have gone to the other restaurant, but I took the longer route. I went farther and that's literal too. I'm driving, almost twice the distance. And it's just different. You make those difficult choices and you have to sit with it and think, did I make the right choice? Ultimately, yes. Because like you said, doesn't matter. You could have gone to the other restaurant and visited your friend, but you could have visited your friend and said, hey, let's go to this restaurant that's closer to you. So I mean, ultimately, you make the right choice irrespective of what the choice is. Just make the choice, and that's interesting. I did a little reading that I had recorded. I don't know if I'm going to post it or not, but it came up that I can't remember the football coach that, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Just make a decision.
Oh, I thought you were saying take the fork. I was like, yeah, you never know when you need a fork to eat.
You can do that too.
I've
Oh,
never
man.
understood why they call those forks in the road.
Because it's two tines at least. And then if you look at some really old forks, some of them did only have two, look at the old serve,
Yeah, it's true. I didn't think about
only had
that.
two forks on them. But anyway, so yeah, here we are coming up to almost 90 minutes. So I know, Michael, you sent me your link tree. So did you want to kind of explain what you're doing?
So on Tuesday nights, I do a podcast show called The Energy That Surrounds Us. It's at 9 o'clock Central Time. And I am talking with guests about different paranormal topics. And paranormal to me is anything that's unexplainable. So any of those topics that catches my interest and I have a guest that I can share that with, I will bring them on. And so that is the fun of Tuesday nights. Wednesday nights, I have Riding Through the Unknown at 8 o'clock Central Time. And that is my disclosure slash esoteric series. And for those of you watching who are thinking I've never heard the term esoteric, don't feel bad. I didn't hear of it either until August of 2023 when it was explained to me that it simply means something that's been hidden from us. And I was like, that explains a lot. So I share on that series a lot of topics that interest me that is kind of information I feel like that's been hidden from people and I want to share it and bring light to it. And you can either agree with or disagree with the show. Personally, I have no qualms either way. I do it for fun and to broaden my horizons and share topics that I'm passionate about as well outside of the paranormal. So it gives me an outlet to talk with people as well. And Thursdays, twice a month, I do paranormal verses with a couple in the UK. And that is a conspiracy theory paranormal episode where we talk about paranormal stuff and sometimes we'll cover some conspiracy theories. And that show is at 3 o'clock Central Time because that is 9 o'clock GMT or British time because they're in the UK. So that's why I do that episode that way. And on Sundays right now, I'm recently joined a show called The Beast System where we take things that are going on around us and we deep dive it and say, look, this is what you're seeing on the surface, but here is what's going on underneath. What do you think about this? Is this something you support or is this something you're against? In which case, if you're against, now you have information about this so you can see it in other places and open your eyes. And so that's the conspiracy theory slash deep dive into the world around us of what's going on. And we've done episodes like the JFK assassination. We've done, we did an episode for the election day where we covered the election and said, were results coming in like what we thought they should, or does something seem fishy about these results? Do we need to watch this? Is something going on? Or we did an episode for President Carter's funeral where we were respectful, but we were simply noticing, like, look at this person reacting to this situation. What does that tell you? Who shook hands with who? What does that tell you? What's going on here? And so, yeah, we try to be respectful, but we also try to open people's minds and eyes to what's going on right in front of them that they may be missing. And so those are the four shows that I'm currently doing.
Yeah, the Sunday one, that sounds like really a lot of fun, actually.
It
Well,
tends to.
yeah, I'm gonna put all the, once we wrap this all up, I'll eventually put all that stuff in the description box below. Um, so Stone Hobbit and I are probably gonna do something. She's gonna give me a date. I don't know if we're gonna do a live or do a recording or what, but we're definitely gonna do something and it's always gonna be fun. We have our little divine feminine blast, as I put it, and I don't know, we just kind of wing it. Sometimes we have a topic we want to talk about, and other times it's just kind of like, yeah. Now that my technology thing is basically a non-issue at this point, I still have a wire running through my house up on the floor, but you get used to it until I can get somebody to deal with that. But anyway, very grateful for everybody who stops by, and have a great rest